Just a little disclaimer here to add. A lot of these episodes are going to touch on maybe some legal references. First of all, I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. Always talk to a trained legal professional before taking any action. If I do have a legal professional on the podcast, they are probably an Indiana-based legal professional. So if you are not in the state of Indiana, your laws and rules and the way that your legal system and your family law system work may be very, very different. So just putting that disclaimer out there. This is just informational, things for you to think about. This is not formal legal advice. So make sure that you are connecting with the right professionals to help provide the specific guidance for what your case requires based on where you are. This is the Divorce Curious podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mitchell. If you're here, your life and marriage might kind of suck right now, and I've been exactly where you are. At Divorce Curious, we're going to say the quiet parts out loud. We're going to sit in the anger, confusion, and disappointment that you're feeling and talk about what it looks like to go through the before, during, and after of being divorce curious. I'm glad you're here. All right, we are here with part 2 with family law attorney Portland Schnitzius, and she had so much good information to share, so much perspective, so much good advice around the do's and don'ts of how to kind of manage yourself during a divorce from the legal perspective and the divorce proceedings perspective. And it was so good. She dropped so much information that I had to break it up into part 1 and part 2. So this is part 2 of that episode with family law attorney Portland Schnitzius. If you have not listened to part 1, cue it up. You're not going to want to miss a single nugget of wisdom that Portland shares. So this is part 2. Enjoy. Let's talk about, because there's the money piece, there's the fear of not being able to financially sustain that keeps a lot of people stuck. The other thing that a lot of people worry about is if you have been in a relationship where you hear, well, if you leave me, I'm taking the kids.
Good luck.
Right? That's, I love that answer. I love that answer. I can tell you in my divorce and post-divorce period, despite any logic I had, despite any legal advice I had, despite any lack of belief that there would be actual action taken, the quickest way to spin me up and make me spiral and get me emotional was to say something either about my parenting or threaten to take more time away from me with my kid. Even if I knew academically and intellectually that none of that was even possible, and had that started being thrown at me prior to getting divorced, I probably would still be married. So can we bring some clarity around, and I know there's a million different nuances around this, but just some normal operating procedure or normal outcomes when it comes to combating the idea or the threat of, I'm going to take the kids, to kind of keep somebody stuck in a marriage?
People need to understand the overarching legal standard for deciding that custody and parenting time question is what's in the best interest of the children. To take the kids away from either parent is never in the kid's best interest unless it can be proven that that parent is doing something that is having a negative impact on a child's emotional or mental or physical well-being. And it can be proven. And the link can be proven. So it's important to understand that from both sides, that both parents' rights, highly important in the state of Indiana, that both parents have their rights. Even criminals get to see their kids. It's just a matter of how much and
the standard of care. When I found out what the definition, the standard of care thresholds were for the state of Indiana, which is where we're recording this podcast and currently reside, the standard of care is so low. The things you would have to do or not do to your children to lose parenting time in this state
Do you mean in the state juvenile court system, Department of Child Services, or in divorce family court?
In divorce family court. And the thing that's so hard, I think, when you're looking at this from a parent, and to your point, like both parents are going to lose time with their children if they go from currently residing in a home together to living separately. Like it just is. Whether you're doing anything wrong as a parent or not, you're going to get less time with your kids pretty much all the time. But the thing that was hard for me, it's like, okay, well, a parent doesn't lose time with their kid if they're stupid, right? Like I was spun up about something that my ex-husband was doing or going to do that I thought was like just a blatant endangerment. But by definition, legally, it was just like ill-informed and dumb. It wasn't illegal or didn't meet the threshold of like harm to the child, right? And I had a neighbor of mine at the time that was in law enforcement, and he said, and I called or texted him and said, hey, like, here's the situation. Is there anything I can do about this? And his response was, unfortunately, there's no law against being stupid as a parent. Like,
nor being mean. Right. No law against being mean.
Right. And I think that's where I hear a lot of frustration is like, just because you don't like how that person treats you does not mean that person does not get their entitled time with their child, which feels terrible to you when you're cranked up about something that somebody's doing to you. But from a parenting time standpoint, or from a you not liking how they're behaving, is not going to be seen as justification for them not getting their parenting time, whether you like it or not, at least in my experience. But I'd love to know from a professional standpoint.
It can be how they treat you. The co-parenting relationship is most significant when we're deciding issues of joint legal custody.
And define joint legal custody. What falls under that umbrella?
That is decision-making authority for major medical, educational, and religious decisions.
So there's the legal custody, and then there's the physical custody. And what's the definition of physical custody?
Physical custody, you'll see in settlement agreements, primary physical custody. That basically means the parent that the child resides with the most, and then that's subject to the other parent's parenting time. Now, that term is really a hot button for some people, especially if they're splitting 50-50 time, then they want to make sure the agreement says that they have joint physical custody. But the reality is, where do those kids lay their head on the pillow at night? The house that they're laying their head on the pillow the most overnights in the year, according to the settlement agreement. That's the primary physical custodian. And one of the problems that I see is whichever of the parents has been the primary caretaker during the marriage, just simply many times based on the division of labor. One parent likes giving the baths, and the other parent, not so much. One parent likes preparing the meals, or their work schedule is more conducive to preparing dinner. One parent likes to do the math homework, or they drive the kid to the tutor. I see so many people, to use your word, get spun up. They get spun up saying, well, he or she never did any of these things. I did 100% of all those things that you just described. So it's not going to go well for my child because he or she doesn't know how to do the bath time, bedtime, juggling homework amidst bath time, bedtime, dinner time. He or she will be overwhelmed. They'll do a crappy job. The kid will suffer. This just can't be. And I've had judges say, well, let him try. Needs to learn sometime.
Yeah. And that is so hard to hear.
It is
so hard to hear.
It's a good reason during the marriage, let up some of those norms and the control over some of those activities. And both parents should be doing those activities.
Yeah, it's hard to think when you're in a marriage how you can best maneuver in that marriage should there be a divorce.
And I don't want to be thinking those things, but it's a training ground for everybody in a marriage, right?
Absolutely.
When we had our first child, my husband had never held a baby. He was scared to death. And the first time I left the house to go work out for an hour, he was mortified.
Yeah.
We all have to learn, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, like, there were things that I was worried about because I did a lot of that kind of primary caretaking with my daughter, and she was pretty young when we got divorced. But given the autonomy and the necessity, her dad was able, to his credit, he got it done, right? He might have done it differently than I did, but I'm kind of a type A control freak. So of course, the odds of it being different than how I do it are high, but to his credit, right? I was sometimes shaking my head like, oh, why would you do it that way? But the things that were necessity got done. The basic needs got met. The basic care was given. I just had to like adjust the expectation that it was going to be the same as how I do it. And it actually was not as hard to see that happening as I thought it would be when I was fighting for things in the process.
But I see what you mean about the standard of care. One example is in the state of Indiana, we don't have a minimum legal age for a kid to stay home alone.
Wow. Never mind.
Would you believe that?
We're in Indiana. Of course I believe it. Are you kidding me?
And
that's
so
the least of our worries.
Co-parents will fight about the fact he shouldn't have parenting time because he lets the child stay home alone and they're only 11. And well, that's a parenting decision.
That is the point. I love that you brought that point up, right? Because I learned there is such a difference between a standard of care and a parenting decision. And there's a chasm between those two things for most people. And it is really hard as a parent who is seeing their child be cared for outside of their home now with another person where you have, and you really don't have any domain. You really don't have any domain.
Very hard.
It's very hard. I understand why some people stay stuck in a bad overall marriage to avoid the discomfort that comes when you have to like adapt to those situations.
It can be emotionally devastating to some people, especially when their child comes home and reports.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Guess what? There's no food at Dad's house. And come to find out, it means there's no snacks that I like. But you hear that and you react and it's just...
Of course you do. Yeah.
So sometimes people need a family attorney to talk them off the fence and help them emotionally. This is a lot of what I do in parenting coordination is say, I know this sounds big, but I promise you it's not a hill to die on. Let's figure something out that feels good for both of you.
Perspective. You can come in with your big ideas and loud opinions, right, as the song lyrics go, and think you're going to dictate how it goes. And I think that's one of the things that people get surprised by too, is they think that they're going to dictate how things go.
There are ways to do that, though. Let's talk about that. That's a point people need to understand. There are different paths to get to a finalization of a divorce and get a decree. One of them is to have the two attorneys negotiate the final settlement and all of the child-related issues. One of them is to mediate that. Another one is to take it in front of the court.
So you don't always have to end up in court to get your divorce.
No. And I try my best to keep families out of court. The statistics in Indiana are that only about 5% of divorces will go to a trial. We have a lot of provisional hearings for provisional orders that you mentioned, but for a final hearing, about 5%, because the courts are using a lot of what we call ADR methods, alternative dispute resolution, one of which is requiring the couple to go to mediation before they will be given a final hearing date. So the beauty of that is at mediation, you can put things in that settlement agreement that a court's never going to give you. So if you've got a lot of parenting standards of care that are very important to you, go and mediate and hash it all out and get that language in your decree.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an important option to know about. And to your point, right, as I understand it, like most of the time, if you go before a judge or you go in to have, you kind of negotiate things at that point versus having a plan or having an agreement to hand to be approved by the judge. A lot of times it's like state table parenting time and it's just the math available on the standard default math on how things are calculated and parenting time and support and whatever. And you basically are letting it. The advice I was given is like anything that you two don't decide ahead of time, a judge gets to decide and you don't have control of it. So if there's something.
A stranger that doesn't know you and your kids.
Right. I think that's just such an important thing to know.
I mean, it's fine for a contempt hearing. It's fine for provisional orders, but for a final divorce hearing, it's just very rare and thankfully so.
And I think I've heard that there's this kind of the mindset sometimes of like, oh, well, I'm going to go tell the judge this or that, and they're going to do that. And to me, in most cases, and talking to mediators and other attorneys, it's like the narrative is not that important. Like if you wait to let the judge decide, it's probably going to be the straight standard math. And the story around it, or how you feel about it, or what you think you're going to come and get big and loud about, and they're going to take your side, you're probably going to be surprised and disappointed that that doesn't play the way you think it does. So having as much with expert guidance sorted out to be able to say, this is what we've agreed on, and this is what our normal is going to look like now. There won't be a lot of, as long as it's fair and reasonable, there's not going to be a lot of resistance around just accepting what you're presenting to the judge. Is that fair?
The courts just basically rubber stamp these final settlement agreements, unless it's glaringly, obviously unfair and inequitable. But if you want to put in your settlement agreement, we're not going to leave Johnny home alone until he's at least 13, court's not going to care. It's going to be approved.
But if you wait to get to court and say, oh, judge, I don't want my son left alone until they're 13, it's going to be like, well,
yeah, good luck.
Too bad. That's a conversation for you all to work out, because according to what's required here, there isn't a standard for that. The importance of a good, predetermined, pre-negotiated, this is what we want our future day-to-days in the handling of our children to look like, is by far the best path that gives you the most control.
Or sometimes you can mediate and you can figure out 9 out of 10 items. And if there's one hill to die on that's left and you just can't get there, let the judge decide that one thing.
Yeah. That's kind of what we ended up doing. There was one thing we just had everything else hammered out, one thing that was still under dispute, and it stayed open. He granted our divorce with that issue staying open for a long time.
Really? Interesting.
Yes. He gave us the option. He's like, we can either just come back later when you sort it out, or I can grant the divorce and note this is an open issue. We're like, get us out.
Interesting.
I was very surprised by that, though. I thought for sure there would be a directive on it, and there just wasn't. So I'm like, okay, then. There's so many things to be surprised by. I cannot strongly enough encourage anyone who's, again, if you're divorce curious, if you're even thinking about it, collect the data points, make a consultation. How does it work when somebody's like, I don't know, but I need some answers before I do things? How do you work with people like that to kind of help them at least know what they could expect the process to maybe look and feel like for them?
I say it sounds like it would be helpful to you to come have an appointment that I call Get Your Ducks in a Row, and pay my hourly. We'll spend about an hour and a half together. You can make notes, but get some data points. So they will come in and collect their data, and maybe I won't ever hear from them again, or maybe it'll be many months, or maybe it'll be the next day. So I think that is very helpful. And do that with a couple of attorneys, because you're going to walk through life with maybe daily emails and lots of touch points with your divorce lawyer. Go sit down and have a ducks in a row talk with a couple, at least. Maybe a man and a woman. See who's the best fit. Find out what kind of a office they run. Sometimes it's such a busy practice, you're going to talk to their paralegal and not to them. Ask them, what's your turnaround time on returning a phone call?
You don't think that's important, but that is so important.
And some people say, I want big law. They want a big law firm.
Right.
Well, most family law firms are medium to small. And I like to say I'm a boutique law firm. And I think that people need a lot of hand-holding when it comes to family law.
Yeah, it's the most precious thing in your whole life that's coming under a microscope, and you got to fight for it. And money's one thing, but the kiddos and the heart level stuff, and that you have to have somebody that you feel like can hear you. Go have a face-to-face
and say, do I just have a good vibe with this person? I'm just always kind of amazed that someone will hire me just over the phone, or maybe just a Zoom call, because they've got a sense of urgency, and that's fine too.
Because this is like a really long first date. You're in it. It is a relationship upon, or unto itself. The relationship that you have with your attorney through this process is also a relationship to be managed.
And not that you're stuck with it. You can always fire us. That's fine too.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to dance with me, I don't want to dance with you. So that's fine.
Right. But I think there is something to be said for the thoughtful selection. And again, the vibe. Is this somebody I feel that's going to listen to me and that I can trust? And I mean, we assume there's a level of competence there, but the level of confidence will vary greatly. So, talk about approaches on cases similar to yours, right? You feel really good about who you are in partnership with. I mean, you're paying them to ride out with you and to advocate for you and to put their expertise to use for your best outcome.
And sometimes it can be a 18 or 19-year relationship. I mean, a lot of my clients, until these kids turn 18 for purposes of parenting time jurisdiction or 19 for purposes of child support, we still have things to do. There are modifications.
Oh, yeah, there are.
There are little things to figure out. You don't have to stay with the same attorney to do that, but we're like the keeper of the story, and you just can't put a price on that. It's really great to know that you've got somebody you can call. And my people, they text me, they can call me. I might not answer after a certain time at night. I try not to.
Boundaries are good.
But you've got to know that there's just some peace in feeling like this person knows my story from A to Z. Absolutely. The good, bad, and the ugly. Continuity counts when it comes to not having to start back with the good, bad, and ugly every time you got to sort something new out. So I absolutely appreciate your focus on the long game. And let's talk about the long game. Since we talked about the beginning, how should somebody start? And I said the ducks in the row meeting. But at the same time, I have a lot of people that'll say, I just want to get this over as quickly as possible. And I say, I do too. I don't like putting my kids through college on long divorces, but don't short circuit the discovery process. Don't be willing to walk away from what you may be entitled to just because you want to wrap it up and you never want to see this person again.
I can tell you my divorce ran over a year and a half from the time separation to divorce in my case. And we had a business, we had some extenuating complexities, I think, in our situation, but there were points of frustration throughout that process and where I kind of talked myself into the motto of like, peace of mind is priceless, right? Which is how I justified maybe not fighting as much as I should have or could have or was entitled to, because there is a fatigue that sets in. There's an emotional fatigue that sets in, especially depending on the personality that you have on the other side of the equation. That's part of the strategy, is to like wear you down and have you just want to push to finality and establish your new normal. And it is so tempting sometimes to just be like, screw it, just sign the papers, right? I just want to be done. But to your point, I think in retrospect, again, she was 3 when we separated and now she's almost 20. And there were things at like 12 or 14, you start thinking about like, oh man, there's nothing about college in here, right? No obligation around support past 19, like there's things that at the time aren't relevant, but could have been more thoughtfully approached had I had a greater level of patience and had I had a little more emotional stamina, I think, at some of those times. So in retrospect, maybe peace of mind should have been slightly like maybe discounted, but not priceless. So I definitely affirm the take a comprehensive approach and take a patient approach and trust the guidance of your attorney because they are there to work in your best interest for the long game and with longevity, so you don't have to go back and fight about things later down the road. So I encourage you to work on your endurance, work on the patience, work on following the good advice that you're paying to be given by your attorney. Just try to have a little more patient approach so you don't end up being like, dang, 10 years down the road, oh, I really wish that would have been worked into the decree. Because at that point, it's kind of too late. So I love the working for the long game and having the patience. But man, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You do get tired.
You do get tired. And we get tired.
You're like, oh my God, can we close this case already?
And the thing that's the long game that's the most important in terms of cannot be modified are the property issues in our state cannot be modified. Child issues can be modified. So sometimes it's okay. Take a wait and see approach how it shakes out. And you can go back. It's a higher standard. You have to prove there's been a continuous change in the circumstances. So we want to get it right on the front side, but things change they're little humans. Things are going to change.
Yes, they do. And then sometimes new people show up and things get shook around, and then you always seek counsel on reevaluating if you feel like there's a need to do so. But Portland, you filled in so many data points today. Like, I didn't know exactly what we were going to cover, but we covered all the things and still barely scratched the surface. I don't know how that works, but
well, good.
I don't know how that works, but I feel like this is a great, you have an open invitation anytime. I'm so interested to get your take on current legislation and the impact on divorce and all that stuff. So I feel like there's definitely a part 2 brewing here if I can.
Oh, I would love to talk about that, because I'm on the executive committee of the Indianapolis Bar Association. Ooh. And we review legislation and we vote and we make a stink about it if we don't like it. And we have made a stink about some of the pending bills that we don't like, such as changing this state over to a no longer being a no-fault divorce state.
I've been screaming about that since the beginning of the legislative session.
Uh-huh.
All right, we're going to do another episode because oh my God, we got so much to talk about that. But for this one, we're going to wrap up with these data points. And hopefully if you are listening to this and you had no idea what the process was going to look like, or you were fearful of what the process would look like, or maybe somebody's telling you that they have control to decide what custody is going to look like, and you're being bullied, or you're afraid to even have that consultation with somebody and to get those data points, please just have the courage to give yourself the permission to fill in what is true and right and real for you in your current situation in the state that you reside in. Give yourself the gift of connecting with an attorney who specializes in family law that can give you just the what to expect in this process and what is true and real for where you are in the situation that you're in, and then decide. But don't stay stuck out of fear and don't rush out of impatience. Do your research, talk to a professional. There's people like Portland. I'll have her information in the show notes for you if you want to connect with her directly. If you're in Indiana, do you practice anywhere else? Indiana?
No,
okay.
I'm only
if you're in
licensed
Indiana,
here.
Portland's an option for you. We'll make sure we get you to her. And if you're in a different state, just go make some phone calls, set some consultations, do so safely. Start working on your financial independence plan. If you don't know your current financial status, or you don't have access, or you're now realizing based on our conversation today that maybe you are in a situation where there's financial control or financial abuse, start this episode over and listen again, and then then start following that advice so you can start getting your situation in a place where you have a little more stable ground to be in. But Portland, any closing thoughts, anything burning on your brain right now that you feel like has to be in the data points piece of this conversation?
I want to give your listeners an idea. First, a reflection. I know the phone can feel like it weighs 100 pounds calling an attorney's office for the first time.
Because then it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. And I had someone say to me today, oh my gosh, I've never talked to a lawyer. I've never had a need. My family has never been involved in a legal dispute. And I'm just so nervous right now. And I know it's very, very hard. And I never called a law firm until I was a lawyer. I feel for you. But, if you're going to come in and have a consult with somebody, you can take a friend. It's nice to have a person come and listen. Just like when sometimes people take someone to a doctor, listen to the same information, make some notes, reflect on it with you. There's no reason you can't do that. We have attorney-client privilege, but you're just doing a meet and greet.
Yeah.
And you're not a client yet. And if it got sticky, you could say, well,
you can step out or,
make a note. This friend is someone that can hear the same information. And there's some peace in that. It makes it easier.
I would have never thought. That's another reason why Divorce Curious exists right now, is because it was such a lonely process for me. And that's not saying I didn't have great friends and people that were like supportive, but there was nobody in it with me. And I think about like how helpful it would have been, or how nice it would have felt to have somebody it never even crossed my mind to bring anybody with me to meet.
Oh, really?
With the attorney. Never once.
Interesting.
So I love that you brought that up, because I think about how that would have felt, how much more comfortable and comforting it would have felt. And like, honestly, how much more I probably would have gotten out of it, because when you're emotional and you're scared and you can't believe you're sitting in an attorney's office, like having to do this, you're not in your most thoughtful data collecting mode.
Or bring your mom. I've had moms come in and bulldog advocate to the T. And,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love just baking support into the process with you. And I would honestly, it never even crossed my mind to have had somebody come with me as a co-pilot on that journey. So thank you for bringing that up. I love that. That's such a great part to end on, I think. And, it's not just your attorney that's there to support you. You have your other support system, and you have us here at Divorce Curious and people like Portland and all of her genius. Again, it's really hard to make a decision you feel good about when you feel like you don't know what you're doing. And so really the whole mission here and the conversations we've had with Portland today, and that we're going to keep having because we got so much more to talk about, hopefully it just gives you enough information and enough even maybe familiarity with the what comes next process that you can stop being stuck by fear and start feeling more confident in whatever decision you make next. That's the whole goal here at Divorce Curious is it's not you should get divorced. It's not you should stay together. It's that you should gather enough information, support, and resources and hear enough stories that you feel more confident in making the next best decision for you, whatever that is. That's all I want for you guys. All right. So Portland, thank you so much for being here today. I can't wait. I can't wait to go in on our next conversation. So y'all stay tuned. Stay tuned for another a part 2 episode with Portland because that's going to happen. And until then, stay curious. Okay, you just listened to part 2 of the episode with family law attorney Portland Schnitzius. If you started on part 2, you might be a little confused and you missed a whole lot of good stuff. So make sure that you go back, check out part 1 of the episode with Portland. You're going to want to hear the whole thing from beginning to end. So check out part 1 now.